Good evening. My name is Robert and welcome to my rough draft video. Now I do apologize for the crudity of said video, but I can assure you that my final product will be much better. But for now, let's get started. My topic of discussion is cognitive change. How does your brain change while using social media? Now I know that sounds like a mouthful, so for now let's just say this is your brain on drugs. Anyway, let's start with some basics about the brain. So the part that we'll be focusing on is called the limbic system, and that houses the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, and the amygdala. Now, the hypothalamus is responsible for regulating bodily functions and chemical balances. So, for example, if you find yourself ever been out of shape or sleepy or hangry because you're trying to finish a certain project, you have your hypothalamus to thank for interpreting that and sending those signals to your body. The hippocampus takes care of short and long-term moods, thoughts, and memories. And the amygdala handles fear and excitement, and it generates that fight or flight feeling that we all experience in one form or another. Another area that we'll be focusing on and discussing is the prefrontal cortex, which is the bread and butter of memory and learning and where addiction is present. Now, for those of you who are wondering, am I addicted to social media? Well, if you have to ask, you probably are. That's the bad news. The good news is, the fact that you did ask means you are aware enough to notice a change in your behavior. More good news, addiction isn't simply a case of willpower where you can just focus and suddenly resist all temptation. Scientifically speaking, addiction is recognized as, quote, a disease that changes both brain structure and function, end quote. Addiction begins with recognizing pleasurable activity and the process that steadily pushes you towards compulsive behavior. More on that later. Finally, together these parts of your brain hijack who you are and control you every time you happen to scroll, like, comment, read, snap, hash, fart, something, I don't know. The point is, as you immerse yourself deeper and deeper into your online persona, your brain reflects your environment, for better or for worse. So, let's start with addiction. When we, as humans, experience a pleasurable activity, which could range from drugs, psychoactive drugs, being given money, eating good food, having sex, take your pick, the brain releases dopamine from what is called the nucleus accumbens, or what is more commonly known as the pleasure center. When a person indulges in any drug, it causes a spike in dopamine, and the chances that a person will become addicted to drugs or other pleasurable activity is directly tied to how quickly it produces the dopamine, the power of the release of dopamine, and the reliability of said release. To draw a comparison, the same triggering release of dopamine can be felt when using social media anytime someone likes, shares, comments, retweets, or generally makes a big or even a small deal about something that we post. The more activity logged, the steadier that release becomes, and before you know it, an addiction is born. It has recently been discovered, however, that the release of dopamine also contributes to learning and memory. Those two functions play a key role in going from liking something to becoming addicted to it. Now, prolonged exposure causes the pleasure center to communicate with the prefrontal cortex and create links that associate liking something with wanting it. That, in turn, motivates us to actively pursue whatever that is that's giving us pleasure. We could then equate that to the next stage of addiction, which is building a tolerance and needing more of that drug and to create that high that we seek. Now, as you may or may not know, that pleasure of addiction will soon fade, but the memories associated with that will still remain. So, on top of that, the hippocampus and the amygdala play a part in keeping the memories and the environmental cues that caused the high in the first place, creating that intense craving or that jonesing that we all crave, or that we all may know of. Sorry. Now, to move on to a more grounding aspect of it, humans, being naturally social animals, and the use of social media, while potentially can be isolating, provides a sense of pseudo-community. This sense of closeness triggers the release of a powerful neurotransmitter known as oxytocin, not to be confused with OxyContin, which is a painkiller. Now, scientists call oxytocin the trust chemical, and it has been known to be released when mothers are bonding with their newborn children, and also when communities are bonding and building that trust. Also, it's just been known as the trust chemical, or some people have called it the social glue. Now, if you don't take anything else, take away the fact that we release oxytocin when we experience emotional contact with other people, considerably touch. When monitored, users experience a surge in oxytocin and decreased stress levels. So our brain feels good while we're on social media. We feel more generous, which leads to more likes and more shares and generally more positive output of content, which keeps us coming back. It keeps those chemicals flowing, which again is feeding into the addiction. So, now that all of you are thoroughly paranoid and wondering, am I, aren't I? Part 2 is just around the corner. Thanks for stopping by, guys.